everybody. My name is Arrayas, and today I am discussing my second studio album, Vices, with my good friend Brett.
What up?
And we are going track by track to sort of go through the circles of hell. Vices is a Dante's Inferno concept record, and each of the 9 tracks represents one of the 9 circles of hell in Dante's Inferno. And today, the first song that I wanted to talk about is the first song on the record, and it's Nocturnal.
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so just going to be asking you some questions about this. You know, I had a chance to go through, the unreleased music you have, some of the release stuff, and I just have some questions for you today. Maybe you want to answer just to give a little insight on, your project, what you're doing, all that sort of thing. So for Nocturnal, I want to start off and just, what is your main inspiration behind this song? I mean, obviously Nocturnal, everybody knows what that means, but what is Nocturnal to you and why did you write it?
Yes. So the cool thing about this is that the first circle of hell in Dante's Inferno is called Limbo.
Okay.
And so kind of how I interpreted that, also coming out of my last record, like a little backstory on me, my previous record was called Blindside. And the last song on Blindside is called Aurora, and it's a Sleeping Beauty spin-off story.
Okay.
And so now it's like the princess Aurora or whatever wakes up. So It's kind of like a continuation of that dark thought. And now she can't sleep.
Okay.
So Nocturnal, this whole idea was these are the thoughts that are keeping me up at night, keeping me in this emotional or spiritual limbo, I guess. Because the thing about Dante's Inferno and about Vices as a whole is that this has been my way of expressing a lot of my religious trauma and things that are wrong with the world and things that have bothered me and that keep me up at night. So my main inspiration with this song is kind of a mission statement, a first idea, a first thing where you get to see what the entire album's going to be about. All the societal moral decay and all of the vices and all of the stories and all of the heartbreak and other things that have just bothered me or kept me up is kind of what I'm going for.
Nice. I love that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to describe it, and obviously I got a chance to listen to the whole thing, and now to hear, your perspective on that kind of makes sense. And I'm sure when we get into the other questions, more things will for, your listeners and people that are, anxiously waiting on the releases and stuff like that. So, all right, I got one more question for you here on this song. So like I said, got a chance to listen to the song. I'm a musician myself, so when I listen to stuff, I can pick apart different things in the song that I hear that are, stand out, that are interesting. When you spend time in a studio, you can kind of hear that stuff. And I swear on after the second verse going into the next part of the song, there's some sort of rattlesnake tales going on in there. I love the production, is it did you use actual rattlesnakes, or was that a producer thing? Who are you working with that gives you this creative sound and, unique different things in your songs?
Yes. So the person who produced the album, his name is Caleb Harris, and he is truly he brought so much life to the album. And the cool thing that he has kind of done is we sort of had this exact interview for each song. He wanted to encapsulate everything that I wanted for each song and make it as, lyrically powerful as possible and highlight my message, first and foremost. So, the rattlesnake sound is not a real rattlesnake.
Okay. Well, now I'm disappointed, so.
I know. But I was, when we were prepping this, I was afraid to tell you that because I didn't want to disappoint you.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's so cool that we have been able to bring in interesting sounds. I've always been a big fan of just weird. Just throw it in there, let's try it. Let's see what happens. If it doesn't work, whatever, we'll take it out, And so with this one, something that I've really kind of honed in on is biblical imagery for this whole album. And so snake in the garden is kind of a very, a through line, lots of biblical phrasing that I think you'll notice if you have gone to church, or even if you haven't. It's popular enough, and pervasive enough to still be able to kind of recognize those motifs throughout. But I think the rattlesnake sound and the is definitely what is represented there. And I think that's going to be on brand for the rest of the record.
Awesome. So, the song is called Nocturnal. You gave us a really good description on, your inspiration behind it, what led you to write this, what led you to ultimately put it in on your project, all those different things. But one thing I really want to ask you, just as a person, what actually keeps you up at night, So if you could just elaborate on some of the things that, you think is wrong with the world, that you have issues with, problems with, whatever it may be.
Absolutely. I try to never trauma dump like on my audience, and I try never to be the person that is always upset or angry. My mission is always to uplift people, So even in this like dark pop setting and this whole like idea of just being kept up at night and being like terrorized by different thoughts, I think that the thing that still bothers me the most is just discrimination against women and probably the LGBT community. I think like as someone that's experienced a lot of this for myself and has gone to like church and institutionalized like religious schools, I think that I've seen, even if they don't mean it, even if it's internalized, just so many different ways that I have just accidentally even been oppressed, that I would like to get into more details on the story. But I wrote this album, or I started writing this album after I withdrew from like Christian college when I was like 19 years old. And I think that all of my experience eventually came out, and it was very cathartic for me and it was very good. But at the same time, like I'm still trying to deal with those things. I'm definitely more powerful now. I'm more confident in who I am. But when I wrote this, I wasn't necessarily that way,
Yeah. No, I think that's a great response. And, we live in a world that, people can really get in on their own selves, you know what I mean? And try to say, this is the right way. But ultimately we're all individuals and we all have the freedom to decide what we want to do with our lives. And so, to try to say that everybody has a decision to pinpoint other people's lives in a certain direction is just false. And I think if people were more focused on letting people be them than focusing on trying to control what everybody's doing in the culture that we live in, we'd be in a better place. So I love that answer.
Thank you. I totally agree. Ultimately, like even someone who has, in a lot of ways, already reconciled their religious trauma, and it doesn't bother me the way that it used to. So it's easy for me to talk about right now. I do still believe in God or a higher power or anything like that. But something that I still think is real is free will and autonomy, and I think that that's something that you can't take away from people. You have to let them decide for themselves and let them live their own lives. So I couldn't agree more.
Right. And I mean, I'm a Christian, I go to church.
Absolutely.
And you see certain things, and, I've been to various different churches, talked to various different people, and, you're right. Like we all have free will. And who is to say that we as people or whatever you believe in have the right, like I just said earlier, to tell people how they should live their life. Right. When, if we truly believe that there is a higher power, if there is God, like it's not up to us to make that decision on what happens.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And so like going forward for the rest of the record and for any more talking that we do, I want this all to come from a place of belief.
Right.
How did I come back to this belief after wrestling it? And I'm happy to like hear that you are a believer as well, because I feel like now like there is a dialogue that we can, as someone who still goes to church, someone who doesn't so much, like that we can still try and see where each other is coming from.
Oh, yeah.
A place of like
for sure.
belief,
No
That's
doubt.
Beautiful. So what keeps you up at night, Brett?
One thing for me is just like that keeps me up at night is just like constant pressure, like because I'm in like my mid-20s, right? Early mid-20s, and just like the fast pacedness of the culture that we live in that like tries to say that like you have to be here while you're 22, you should already have this, that, and this. And it's like, I feel like if more people would just, like I said before, just like really focus on, and trying to find their purpose in life instead of like trying to pinpoint, okay, I got to do this at this time. I've got to be at this point in my life when I'm 25. I got to have 2 kids and be married and a dog at like 28, like just that certain stuff. And it's just like the constant pressure of like the culture that we live in, like the fast pacedness and that sort of thing. It's kind of deflating at times. But yeah, that's kind of one thing that just keeps me up is just like always having to feel like you need to do more when you just need to live in the moment and let it be.
I mean, amen. I think that like I actually think the song kind of touches on that, maybe in a little bit of a different perspective, maybe kind of like more of a female lens perspective.
Right.
But like I wrote in the second verse, this life might have a sugar face coated with the glamour and a fast lane pace.
Yeah, I love that part.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's great.
And it makes you a little bit vain, aiming for a tiny waist and a big fat name.
Yeah.
And the thing is that is that pressure. To
Right.
look a certain way, to have a certain image, to present yourself online a certain way.
Yep.
And I think that all of that is so toxic and creates this casual culture or this fake culture, this virtual culture where we are afraid to be honest with one another about what's really going on and what we struggle with ultimately. So I think I couldn't have said it better myself too. I think that's a great take.
For sure.
Thank you so much for tuning into this discussion on Nocturnal, which is off of my second studio album, Vices, available everywhere.